landmark and turning points in world history, and for Sri Lanka it's a turning point in our history. I mean, everyone talks about 1983 being a watershed moment, but actually our ethnic conflict did not start from 1983. We don't know our history much.
When it comes to writing, if you are touching on, say, something that's something historical or political or things that like that, research is important, getting your facts is important. In terms of restrictions, it's interesting because there are restrictions that might come from outside.
For any society to flourish, its art and culture needs to be given a certain identity to be lifted up. For it to be lifted up, you need to have a platform. Platform creates a whole ecosystem.
Hello everyone, I'm Artika Aurora Bakshi here with Echelon as part of their She Slays series. And here today we have a very interesting panel. We're going to talk about women in the creative space as well as in the Sri Lankan novel. And the people on the panel today are personalities who I know. I've had many chances of having a conversation informally with them. But today I get to pick their brains about their work and what drives them and their thought processes. With me today, our first guest is Ajai Vir Singh, who needs no introduction. He's the man behind CFW, a fashion and design platform that he created and conceptualized more than 20 years ago. He is credited with reviving the Sri Lankan fashion and design industry. And his latest brainchild is the Salon Literary and Art Festival, which successfully completed its first edition, setting a new benchmark in the literary and the art scene in Sri Lanka and abroad. Welcome, Ajay.
Good to be here.
With us again today are two very prominent female personalities in the Sri Lankan literary scene. Ameena Hussein, who we all know for her books, especially the latest one, which won the State Literary Prize for Humanities in 2020, Chasing Tall Tales and Mystics. Ibn Battuta in Sri Lanka is a well-known author and publisher. Welcome.
Thank you.
With her is Chiranthi Rajapakse, who is the joint winner of the 2022 Gratiaen Prize for her collection of short stories, Keeping Time and Other Stories. A dentist, a lawyer, a researcher, and an author, she joins this eclectic panel as we talk about women in the Sri Lankan novel and in the creative space. So welcome, everyone. It's an absolute honor to be with you today. Since Ajay is the only male here, we're going to start with him.
The sole path.
So Ajay, talk us through the Ceylon Literary and Art Festival. The idea, how you came up with this platform, and the reasons.
Well, it's a tough question. You almost take a whole research behind it. Well, I've been involved in the fashion design industry for 25 years, and we created something called, so people think, oh, we do shows and we promote this and promote. No, we don't do shows. We're in the business of creating platforms, because I realized that for any society to flourish, its art and culture needs to be given a certain identity to be lifted up. For it to be lifted up, you need to have a platform. Platform creates a whole ecosystem. So, kids want to go into creative industries. Then there are education institutes that kind of offer them that kind of education. Then there are other openings where they get exposed. Then they, do their work, and their works get recognized. It's a creative roadmap for any creative industry. So having done fashion for 20 years and creating from one designer, there's Yolande in 2003 to now 85% of designers have come out of the platform that we call CFW. So I wanted to expand that and said, okay, there are other industries, right, and all the creative industries are kind of interconnected, right? So I thought, okay, literary, art, music, films. We've attempted that few times with Fashion Week before, but I thought, okay, let it be given a identity of its own, yeah? And we started working on it 2 years ago. And the timing was such that this was the best time to probably come out with it. And having seen that Sri Lanka is taking a corner, or turning a corner, so it was important for it to be, time for it to be launched. Yeah.
So since we are, in this series, which is She Slays, how inclusive is it?
Okay, so my whole take on this inclusivity is a little different. Okay, it's a very spiritual take. So I always believe that you need a feminine energy to create everything. Right. So every time I go for any meetings, or these are my secrets. When I go for any meetings, or if I have any gatherings, I'll always make sure there are more than 50% women involved. Okay.
Super.
So my team, so when they have Women's Day, I have an opposite problem because I'm the only male. There's a 99% female team. Okay. So to me, this equation is very important: masculine energy and feminine energy, right? And creative industry is no domain of any gender. It's completely domain of a strong idea. So organizations can have the directions of, boardroom and all those kind of glass ceilings, but not in creative industries. So hence you see most of the creative industries, not most, nearly all creative industries, you have a very strong participation of women creative brains involved in that.
Ameena and Chiranthi, now you've been part of the Salon Literary and Art Festival. What was your take on the inclusivity there? And how do you compare it with the general scene in Sri Lanka as far as, the literary space is concerned? How easy is it for women to be publishers and authors? We'll start with Ameena.
So I'll first talk about the Ceylon Lit Festival. Thank you, Ajay, for setting it up. I enjoyed it thoroughly as a participant. And to me, Artika, I also have a slightly different take in the sense that for me, as a publisher, when a manuscript hits my desk, I'm actually not looking at what gender has written it. I just want a good product. But what I have discovered is more women are writing than men. And they write different things as well. So they write about different things and they write with a different approach. So with the Ceylon Lit Festival, now thinking back, I think there was a good representation of both genders. Though at that time, I never went to a panel and said, okay, now let me actually fact check how many women are there or not. Because writing is also entertainment. And a literary festival is certainly entertainment. So your benchmark is, did I enjoy it or not? And I can say I enjoyed it thoroughly. I have a bias. I loved Candy because we were all we were like a community that was given the opportunity to meet writers, to meet readers. And so I enjoyed that more because when you're in Colombo, your life comes into Colombo and interrupts it.
That's lovely. And Chiranthi, what about you? Being a writer and being a professional dentist, lawyer, researcher, how easy has it been for you to project your creativity as a woman?
I think maybe more than as a woman, it's projecting your creativity in Sri Lanka. Living in Sri Lanka is always a bit of a challenge, I think, because, if you're writing in English, you're basically doing something that is not going to pay you very much money, to be very honest, most of the time. So then the challenge is, how do you actually find the time and the space to actually do that? So I think I've been fairly lucky. I've been able to manage I work full time as working other jobs while finding time to write as well. But I think it's for whether you're a man or a woman, that is I think really challenging. I don't know, maybe it's something to do with our society, how we measure things as well. I mean, if we measure things only by monetary value, say you might spend years writing a book, which you hope somebody will publish and you hope people will buy and you hope it will reach somebody, but you don't really know. So I think that is really the hardest thing, to make yourself keep going.
So, Ameena, you brought up this thing about Candy, how it was this community, you were taken into this space. My question is again to all three of you, but Ajay, specifically you. How realistic is this creative space that you create, the platform that you create? How much does it really truly reflect reality, the ground reality of what Sri Lanka is?
Well, it's a kind of a lens you see through, right? And it's a refining process. So we started it now, and based on how much freedom you have to express, right? So it's a fine balance of how you narrate the whole story, how you curate it, how much freedom of expression there is, a controlled expression, and people wanting to coming out and speaking. Yeah. So so Colombo could be very managed, right? But other cities can be very real. Yeah, so that's one of the reason was let's go around Sri Lanka. So because the curation there can be I'm talking about not a man curating it, but a general curation of people coming out and giving their best of opinions, and freedom of expression is very important in the creative industry. So when you go out of Colombo, which is very structured, you see the molds broken. And I thought, so that was one of the reasons we thought, okay, Kandy is a good start. Golf was anyways happening. So yeah, and we have interesting plans on few other cities as we go on.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. And Ameena and Chiranthi, when you're talking, we are talking about the realism here, realistic, writing. When women in Sri Lanka are portrayed by women authors and male authors, how realistic is it? How different is it? Are you in a little bubble? Is that what is being projected? And how are different ethnic groups portrayed? Ameena?
That's a very interesting question. As a writer, I have tried to also write from a male perspective, which is tricky because you never know whether you're doing it well or authentic. But I am lucky that my first book was published in 1999. So I started writing in the late 90s. And we didn't know this word appropriation or this cultural appropriation or gender appropriation. So I was quite bold and naive in that way, but it also allowed me the freedom to write from a different sexual point of view, from a gendered point of view, from class, from different ethnicities. As the world has become more woke, you start becoming a little bit more worried. Are you actually able, or do you have a right to write from those perspectives? So now your question about men writing about women, outside for hundreds of years, Artika, men have written about women, both out of Sri Lanka and within Sri Lanka. So that is the norm, and it is a pretty recent phenomenon for women to write about women, for women to take their voice in their own hands. So I find that very interesting. For me, if I read something, and I'm sure Chiranthi, you will agree, if it convinces me, I actually don't mind who writes it. And I think that's part of being a good writer, is you're able to write from different perspectives.
Excellent. Chiranthi, your take on it?
Yeah, same. I mean, similarly, when I'm reading a book, I don't actually think about who the author is or what gender the author is. It's generally, does the story convince you? Do the characters convince you? So similarly, those are the things that usually that I'm thinking about, regardless of who it is written by. And that was actually a good point. Like, I also agree that until recently, most of the viewpoints were from men. It's only very recently that even in outside Sri Lanka, that women became novelists was much later. But now I think we do have a lot of women, even like in Sri Lanka. If you look at people writing in Sri Lanka, I think there's more of a gender balance, I would say, among men and women. I think we're getting to see more and more different perspectives. And that's something that's really nice.
And are the women finding support at home where the roles are not so defined, where you're looking after your house, you're looking after your families, and you're also working and writing?
You can only comment on your own perspective, I guess. I don't really, I think it's probably challenging. I don't know if there's this essay by Virginia Woolf where she says, for a woman to write, you have to have money and a room of your own. And I think that's still relevant today.
I wholeheartedly agree.
To write, you have to have a room of your own. So I don't know, people probably try to achieve that in different ways. I mean, if you're lucky, maybe you have money or you have a house of your own that you inherited or something. Or maybe you have a job that gives it or a family that provides it. You have to work it out in different ways, but it's difficult. It's always difficult.
I think what people don't understand is writing is a very lonely profession. Not even a profession. It's a lonely vocation that you will do. And I would say most of my writing is written what I call stolen time. I don't write during the day. People may think a publisher is, oh, you're so lucky, you can write. But my job is a publisher. It's not a writer, actually. The writer, as Chiranthi's job, is something else. So we all write during stolen time. So my stolen time is from 9 in the evening after dinner, right, till 2 in the morning. So when I worked on Ibn Battuta, it was done during those hours because the house is quiet, the street is quiet, no one's ringing you up, and you have that time for yourself.
So
Yeah, I want to ask this question. So, I mean, a publisher and a writer, like how different is it in the sense that you have to look at, success, like the success of a publishing house also is that you have to evaluate and pick up the best books to publish of the others, and while writing your own, right?
So it suffers.
Yeah.
I will say your personal writing suffers. And I know a lot of people say, when is the next book coming out? I haven't even cracked open, my computer to start on the next book. And because when you're editing something, you're actually focusing all your creative juices on somebody else's material to try to make it the best that it can be.
Right.
So with Ibn Battuta, it was slightly easier because I was editing fiction but writing non-fiction. But now I want to start writing fiction, short stories. And I'm finding it tough because you want it to be original. You want it to be, have a wacky angle, because it reflects you. So I'm editing science fiction, which I don't touch. So that is good. And I'm editing nonfiction.
So as a publisher, you have set the standard very high for yourself. So what comes out from you will have to be that bar. But is it easy being a writer who has a publishing house? You don't need to go through those
I don't know about
processes?
Being easy. No, you have to go through the processes. Oh, when I write and I send a manuscript in, it is vetted, right? So I can't guarantee. I can self-publish if I want, if
Perfect.
Perera-Hussein doesn't agree, but I have no extra rights. Surprisingly.
There are no privileges there.
No privilege, but that's amazing. That's really interesting. And, we're talking about challenges in the creative field. And Ajay, the global crises that we face. In Sri Lanka, we've had our fair share. How has that affected your platforms?
Well, it's tough because when such a thing happens, creative industry is the first one that gets affected because it comes into the non-essentials, right? So that's always a challenge. So I don't know, I don't remember having one good year in last 28 years, but it's always a challenge. It's always something, right? So somehow you have to kind of work around it. But yes, there's a direct impact. For example, we only had the first literary platform, but from the design industry, I can tell you that in 2020, we had 120 applications for young designers from all over, right? Graduates and everyone. It's come down to, it was 34 last year. So that many, and a lot of designers who had just kind of started their little, labels and have left design and gone into sales jobs, and which is really sad because it kills your, your passion to create. And that you'll never be the same again, because you'll be doing something. So that effect really is, so we try to make the platform as, as encouraging in terms of resources also being made available. So I think in last couple of years, we did, accelerator programs, got other companies to fund young talent who could not kind of sustain during these difficult times. So, but now I'm thinking that, but when the country starts turning around, is the creative one that get the first lease of life as well. Suddenly there's positivity. Suddenly they feel, oh, I can do it, So either you need really the fear of God, like COVID, to resign and do what you want to do, right? Or good times to move, right? So yeah.
What about the Sri Lankan publishing and literary platforms, the space? Global affairs, global issues, Sri Lankan issues. How are they represented in the Sri Lankan novel?
writing basically starts from everything that you have experienced, or like my stories might start from, say, an incident or something that I've seen, or basically often writing is a way of trying to explain things to myself or something that I wouldn't understand. So that's obviously influenced by everything happening around you. So it's just that for me at least, my immediate surroundings might affect more. So like in my last collection, like a couple of stories were set during the COVID-19 times at that period. And in my first collection, Names of Numbers, some of the stories were set during the time of the war. So it's like that. I think it's just the whole, everything that's happening around you does feed into what you write. Yeah.
So I'm just going to ask you another question here, whoever. So like Sri Lanka's had the war, and we've got a lot of writing which is war influenced. You have new writing which is coming up with the economic crisis and everything. I mean, I come from India. We talk a lot about the partition, all our writing. So do we ever move forward, or do these writings keep bringing back those memories and create a bit of a disturbance in our lives?
So I'd like to answer that. When many people come and ask us, Perera-Hussein, oh my God, another war story, or why are you all publishing all these ethnic conflict stuff? And my answer to them is the Holocaust. We are in 2024. Books are still coming out about it. Landmark and turning points in world history. And for Sri Lanka, it's a turning point in our history. I mean, everyone talks about 1983 being a watershed moment. But actually, our ethnic conflict did not start from 1983. We don't know our history much. We've only had, I think, 8 years of peace since independence. I think the first ethnic riot happened in 1956.
Right, yeah.
So that is shocking. And since then, it's a series of upheavals interrupted by a few years of peace, is how I would call our history. So we have to write about the war because every new generation has a different take on it. But I'm a slow burner as a writer. I cannot write about COVID until many years later, because it has to sit with me and germinate, and something has to happen. Also, as a writer, I like to challenge myself and write about sometimes I know nothing about. And so half the fun is doing the research of learning about something, and it may go nowhere. It may not go up, become even a short story. But I like doing research and I like reading up about other things. So I think a writer has a lot of power over what they write and how they write it.
And, coming to that, I read somewhere that there is no original art. Art is all recreated, other than the first images that were found in the cave in France. What about writing? Are we recreating it? Is there anything new that's coming?
I think Simone de Beauvoir said there are only 3 different types of love stories. Mm-hmm. And that's just said over and over again in different ways. And I like to think of it like that. But everybody has some unique perspective or unique experience. When I read Chiranthi's first collection of stories, when I wanted to publish her, I found in it a unique voice that I really liked, and that stayed with me. And so I knew that she was a writer with talent and that she needed a platform.
That's beautiful. Ajay, in your field.
Okay, it's like I said, all creative fields are connected, right? So events such as the World War, anyone in the world will always be emotionally invested in those events, always, right? So when you're a creative person, artist or writer, musician, filmmaker, you'll always find some story or perspective because emotionally you are still invested and locked in those events which change the world history. Right. So now you'll see 9/11, right? You see America going into Afghanistan. You see Oppenheimer, like now about so because those world events, somehow every kid who's taught about those events and they're fed those into their curriculums with a certain perspective, when they grow up with their perspective, their fresh take on it, right? So you don't be surprised if you have people talking about 83 in 2033 or something, because it'll always be emotionally you're invested in that, right? And as creative people, for you're a storyteller, right? So you can use the medium of art, fashion, film, music, right? You'll always come out with a new narration of the same event, right? And that's what the beauty is, because your narration is what people buying. Like, Ameena liked, Chiranthi's story of that. What was that? Her emotional investment, her perspective, which got her. So it always works in that kind of a sphere.
Chiranthi, do you have anything to add, or can I ask another question? Since we've got one man here and we are three women, what about this? A lot of writers have in the past, we can understand why they had to do it in the past, used male pseudonyms. And we've had writers in the recent future as well, like J.K. Rowling, who used a male pseudonym for one of her series. So what is your take on that? In the creative field, do we need to be a different person to get our work recognized?
Some people think so, but J.K. Rowling, I think she didn't say whether she was male or female. J.K. initials, we all have initials. I think she wanted to distance herself from her other persona that was well known, and it's readers who assumed she was a male.
And Robert Galbraith.
Yes, Robert Galbraith. Yeah,
yes, she did use that. So. Yeah.
I think there are it's a personal opinion. Sam reminds me that when I started writing my opinion pieces, which were quite frank and maybe to some people hard-hitting, initially I wanted to write under another name, a pseudonym, because that was caution and a little bit of fear. Because when you write something and it's out there, you never know whether it's political, whether it's religious, what will happen. But he said, if you do not have the conviction to write something and put your own name, then you shouldn't be writing it. That was his opinion, but I took it to heart. And we were talking about it the other day. And he said, he personally, as my husband, is very glad that I did that. I think when you're writing delicate subjects or something that could be construed in a different way, some writers might feel safer to write under another name.
Chiranthi, do you want to add something to that, Ajay?
Well, I like what Sam told you. If there's conviction, then then you go with your name, right? Because there's conviction on, because the idea is strong. But yes, you can try to be safe as well. But I feel the conviction is more,
But Ajay, I'd like to ask you a different question. So in the fashion industry, don't people sometimes change their name, like their fashion designer name? Does it happen?
No, not the designers. What they do is they'll put another brand name. Like years ago, I launched a brand name called Arugambe, right?
Yes.
So I didn't put Ajay because I thought, because I wanted to capture a certain vibe. So then you put that brand name. Say Arugambe was one at that time. So they won't change their names, but they may bring in another name. Right? Or if you come from an old Italian or a French heritage, then your surnames are important, like Prada would stay, Valentino would stay, But because that time, that came from the heritage of master craftsmen. So you would know who the master craftsman was to go to, So they would use, for example, I would find in fact, I have not come across anyone who's not used their own name. They may use another name as a brand name, but they won't change their name.
That's very interesting. And taking it from that question, how safe and free is it in the creative world? Here it includes the performing arts, the literature, fashion, everything, to express yourself. How much do you control yourself based on your audience? Ajay, we'll start with you.
So, so it's a very interesting. So, like I always believe, all the creative industries are, connected, integrated. But in fashion, it's a little different because why is it different is that an artist can express and create an amazing, piece of work. But at best, you would take it and you'll place it on a wall, right? But when you create clothes, you have to wear it, right? So when you wear something, it's almost like your personal art to be worn. So the sensibility changes there, So, and also it's all connected to business in the end for everyone, yeah. Unless it's a hobby that you do it just for, it doesn't matter whether you sell or not, right? So if it's not a hobby, then you need to also have a direction of, okay, what kind of revenues will I get on that? So for clothes, because you have to wear clothes, you can't go completely bananas in terms of what you're expressing. Yeah, so they may not have as much freedom as a filmmaker may have, or a musician may have, because you'll watch a film how often? Once, twice. But your shirt, you're going to wear it every week or every month. So that's a little boundaries that do come in, which kind of differentiate each creative stream from the other. In terms of, that's my take on that.
I have seen you break boundaries with your writing. You can tell us more about that.
Because in writing, you're selling ideas, right? When I write, I'm hoping that someone will come away with a different way to think about a situation, maybe an everyday situation. I write because I belong to the Muslim community. I also write a lot about the community. And because there's a lot of, in Sri Lanka, while we call ourselves multicultural, we are almost on parallel railway tracks. So you know that the other exists, the Sinhala exists, the Tamil exists as a Muslim, but you're still very much on the Muslim community trail. And it happens, and occasionally you'll meet, and food is a remarkable bond that we can have. Whenever I go to a wedding now, a Sinhala wedding, and they serve biryani and watla appam, I'm thrilled. I'm secretly thrilled, because that is inclusiveness. That is an embracing of different cultures and different communities. But where ideas are concerned, I am careful. If I'm going to write something that might be provocative, I have to make sure that it is substantiated. So I actually do a lot of research. I may have wacky ideas, but I can't put them on paper until they are crafted so that there is a lot of basis for that idea. So I would say that I am a cautious writer because I think of everything in a different way.
That's excellent. Chiranthi.
It's really interesting to listen to both of you, especially about the ones about fashion. That's something I hadn't really thought about. And yeah, when it comes to writing, yes, I would agree with you. I mean, especially if you are touching on, say, something that's something historical or political or things like that, research is important. Getting your facts is important. I mean, in terms of restrictions, it's interesting because there are restrictions that might come from outside, like your actual fear about, say, if you're going to write about something that's very politically sensitive or things like that, would you offend people? There's that, and there's also those unconscious things that might be inside you, which you don't realize even when you're writing, that you might unconsciously be restricting yourself from writing on certain subjects or things. So it's an interesting question. And I think to answer that fully also is quite difficult. I mean, I don't think I restrict myself when I write. But sometimes I wonder, do I or don't I? I mean, it's a difficult question to answer.
That's your personal censorship, so
Yes.
that you don't get caught up with the external censorship that many face.
But I want to say
Possibly.
something.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm writing a sex scene, and I'm thinking, is my mother going to read this? Or are my aunts, uncle, father? I'll write it, but I will try to encourage them not to read the book.
On that note, since all of you slay in whichever field that you are in, I'd like to thank you for coming for this panel today with Echelon. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here with
Can
us.
I ask one question?
Yes, please. We go back to Ajay.
Yeah, one question from you. I was thinking about it. No, you're a dentist, right?
Yes.
So now, so you started writing.
Yes.
Say, if today's, like you were encouraged to write, right? And if you're given a fair chance, right? I was thinking about it. Would you have taken writing as a profession or being a dentist?
Okay. Well,
Because you said that I want to know if it makes enough money doing a writing thing, because you loved writing, right?
yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, I still consider writing my profession. I mean, in the
Okay.
sense, it's what I mostly do, and it's what I am most invested in.
Yeah.
But practicalities mean I also have to have another job.
Oh, okay.
So,
But if it was different, you could go for writing. Means if
Yes.
writing was very well paid and this was a successful one, right?
yeah, I mean, in the sense that if I could live on what I wrote, then I would probably just write.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
That might be
it
true
was
of
it
many
was running in my
writers.
head for a while to ask this question. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
on that note, we shall carry on with our conversation over coffee. And thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.